Welcome to UNCAGED, a show that celebrates thought leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. Today, we're speaking with Janeesa Hollingshead. Hi, Janeesa.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going really well. I'm excited to talk to Janeesa. Janeesa is the co-founder of JJ Studio, which is a consultancy that specializes in helping Series A and B startups launch and grow their services. And as an entrepreneur who has grown a company, Janeesa, I know how important your services and solutions are. So I'm really excited to talk to you more about that. But before we get into JJ Studio and what you guys are working on, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Sure. So I have a background working in tech startups for a little over 10 years now. Started out at Fundable, helping entrepreneurs learn how to get funding for their businesses after the Jobs Act passed. And from there, I worked at a couple of different places doing marketing, operations, started my own business on the side for a little bit. And then I joined the Uber team actually in January of 2015, helping them launch markets for their rides business. I worked in Kentucky, Cincinnati, Brazil for a little bit, came back and then started launching Uber Eats across the Midwest, pretty much everywhere from Nebraska to Ohio. So a big chunk of the country there. And then I eventually joined the Uber Works team and grew that from an idea to a large line of business with about 100,000 users or 100,000 workers on the platform. And then in August of 2020, I started my own business when I left Uber. And now I'm doing consulting for companies, marketing operations and product launch.
That's great. I can imagine that living through the early period at Uber, where you're just kind of rocketing forward and launching new divisions every day. I mean, what an amazing learning and experience, and a great way to kind of apply ideas. Tell me a little bit about how you're bringing all of that experience to bear on what you're working on today with JJ Studio.
Yeah, so I started JJ Studio with my co-founder, Julia Limbersky, and she was the head of central operations at Uber.
The other J.
The other J, JJ Studio, yeah. And so we have really leveraged what we've learned in terms of marketplace platforms, taking something from an idea to, a multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar, in the case of Uber company, a lot about organizational design and structure. And we're taking these principles that we learned in our previous lives and applying them to companies, to startups, or recently funded companies that may not have the ability to hire a Silicon Valley executive level team member, but they need that expertise and that insight to meet the expectations of their investors.
So it sounds great. I mean, how does a company, let's say a Series A company, work with you guys? I mean, how does that relationship get structured?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different ways that we work with these companies. First is in an advisory capacity. So for a fairly low monthly fee, we'll sit on the advisory board of a company. We will help them with introductions to investors. We're angel investors ourselves, limited partners in a couple of different funds. We will help them structure their financial projections. We'll help them with their user acquisition plan, their pitch deck if they need to raise more funds, as many companies typically do. So really a little bit of anything and everything for a few hours a month of advisory services there. And so that's the very first tier of how we work with companies. Otherwise, when we start getting into the larger projects, we can act as fractional CMOs or COOs so that we're actually owning a certain part of their business, user acquisition, sales, marketing, whatever it may be, right? And we fully execute on that. We have our own team of virtual assistants, operations associates, designers, developers, so we can own something from end to end. And then beyond that, we also do project-based work where, let's say, a company wants to launch a new product, they need a marketing plan for that, or they want to do a direct mail campaign inside of marketing, but they just don't have the bandwidth to do it. we can also do the project-based type of work for them. And then at the end of everything, no matter what, we do create a playbook and templates for our clients to use so that they can then in-house what they're doing and not have to use consultants and agencies forever. And then we can move on to the next thing with that client.
It's great. So when you enter these companies, you have experience obviously with a lot of different types of businesses, a lot of different types of tech firms. What are the kind of, I guess, normal states of affairs that you find things in when JJ Studio gets the call?
Um, I would say the most common situation that we walk into is that a startup founder or a founding team has done a great job getting everything together and getting it off the ground. They're really in that hustle, gritty mode where they just have to get things done, but there hasn't been a lot of organization to what they're doing. There hasn't been a lot of reason behind the madness. Maybe, they've tried a little bit of everything. They haven't tracked their data. That's really common. Their analytics is really in a bad state. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to come in, look at what's worked for them previously, make sense out of all of that, and then turn it into something that can scale.
And today, obviously, we've lived through this extraordinary moment, and I'll definitely want to ask you more about kind of your personal path in a second. But just for all of these businesses, now I found that the last year has been, in many respects, kind of a watershed moment. There were a lot of companies that were kind of were failing, kind of traditional old companies, before the pandemic, and this kind of put the final stake in their heart, or forced dramatic reinvention of those companies. And I saw a lot of companies that were kind of like great concepts, but seem to have really caught fire. And I'd just be curious, kind of like, what are you seeing in the tech space right now?
Yeah, I would say that the companies that you're seeing catch fire, they are not able to pivot as quickly as others. So they may have instituted too much process, too much bureaucracy, or they maybe hadn't planned for some kind of.
I meant catch fire in a good way. I mean, in the
I
sense of
understand.
like growth. I mean,
Oh,
there's probably the bad ones that are catching fire, like a, I don't know, like a gasoline fire. But I really, I mean, I look at some of these businesses, and I would say most of the heavy tech businesses seem to be doing really well. And I'd just be curious, kind of like, how that's kind of impacting the type of work that you guys do.
oh, sure. Yeah. So the tech companies that are doing really well are the ones that are making something more convenient for people when they're staying. Netflix, has gone crazy through the pandemic.
Yeah.
There are a lot of actually like meal kit companies that they've gone the digital route in terms of like selection and interacting with their customers and all of that, and they have just gone off the charts. They're not necessarily a tech company, but they play in that space. Um, it's really been fun to see how many people have had the opportunity to work on their ideas during the pandemic, and maybe do things that they had been thinking about for a long time, but hadn't had the opportunity to start. Myself and Julia being, one example of that. And so there are a lot of new entrepreneurs that are entering the space for the first time, and so there's been a lot of really interesting and fun ideas to work with.
Those are really good points. I definitely remember before the pandemic that there was a lot of discussion about those kind of food delivery businesses, and high acquisition costs and some of the challenges that they were facing. But you're absolutely right; they have taken off over
Yeah.
the last year.
Yeah, one of
Uh,
our clients, Say to Eat, they're white labeled food delivery and food delivery automation platform, so that they compete with the big players, right? But they're totally behind the scenes. Customers don't know about Say to Eat, only the businesses that use them, and they're using things like Facebook Messenger re-engagement automation. to get people to order more, because people are at home, they're playing on Facebook a little bit more. And so they've really leveraged that kind of thing to grow their business like wild over the last year.
So with as a kind of a company, I guess, that advises these businesses not only on their marketing and sales, but also their operations. Just be curious, kind of what you've seen in terms of remote work, hybrid work, or how these companies are handling that.
Yeah. So JJ Studio, we're actually fully remote. I haven't met most of our team members in person. We're all over the place, from Ukraine to the Philippines to San Fran to I'm in Puerto Rico. So it's we've had to learn how to do that as well,
Hmm.
as these other companies. And so what I've seen from our clients and what we've experienced is that the most important thing is to have one source of truth in terms of project management, and then to have somebody whose job it is to oversee those projects and make sure that people are aligning, they have the information they need, and that things are getting done. And then you can really easily work across time zones and across places as long as you have that in place. So we use
Hmm.
Asana for project management. We use Slack with specific channels for specific
Hmm.
functions and projects, and that's worked really well.
I like the phrase "the source of truth," so I may borrow that, Janisa. That's pretty powerful. So let's change gears a little bit and talk about the pandemic. It has been a moment where we've all had to think, rethink, change, rechange, evolve, panic, lots of joyful things. But how have you stayed sane, and how are you? How's everything going?
Things are going really well. Couldn't be going better. I'm really lucky and grateful. Things have been going well during the pandemic. But how I've stayed sane and how Julia has also stayed sane, we agreed early on that we needed to make sure that we prioritized our personal time and
Mm,
weren't just allowing work and personal life to kind of bleed into one another too
mhm.
much. Meaning, we didn't want to sit down with our laptop at the kitchen table at 8 a.m. And then, the next thing you know, you look up and it's midnight, because there's just not that physical separation of work and
It's
personal time
hard.
anymore.
It's
Yeah.
hard. I definitely suffered from that for sure early on, where I just found days just bleeding into nights, bleeding into
Yeah.
days.
It's easy to do. It's so easy. And so what we've done is we've agreed on making sure that we prioritize exercise time, that we have a hard stop time when we need to, and just really being honest with each other about what we need to stay sane. Sometimes you need a day off, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And we shouldn't feel guilty for that. And I think a lot of people maybe do feel guilty for taking a day off because we're home all the time. And it almost feels like a day off if you're home, even though you're working. And so we've really just been transparent with each other and held each other accountable for taking that personal time when we need it.
Yeah, well, I think those are all really great ideas, and in some ways, it does reflect some of the things that I've been seeing in the marketplace, which is, over the last year, the companies that have gone virtual do seem to be thinking more broadly about the whole self, the whole employee, and I would be curious now, as we think about this post-pandemic moment, what do you think are the things uh, that we're going to continue to evolve and continue to learn from here from this pandemic? And what do you think are the things that people are just going to trip up and go back into their I say their bad habits, because I feel like there's been a real moment of growth here in a way, and I maybe it's just my hope. My hope is that we continue to grow, but I'd just be curious, what are your thoughts about the future?
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. I think companies that are going to grow and succeed and really be those companies that employees want to work for are going to be the ones that continue to think about their employees as real people with a
Hmm.
life inside of work and outside of work, and that they affect one another, right? And so the companies that invest in their employees by allowing them to work where it works for them. So maybe it's the office, maybe it's at home, Maybe it's some blend of both. Companies that care about employees' mental well-being, maybe have some kind of employee perks that help them with Talkspace or Calm or some kind of meditation app.
Right.
Anything along those lines. I think those are going to be the ones that have people vying to work for them, even more so maybe than they do now. And I think people are going to start viewing companies that are more rigid as antiquated, and they're going to have a tough time getting the best talent. Um, I know
I
what.
hope so. I hope you're right. I have to admit, it's been fascinating for me to look at the kind of the trade press lately, where I'll look at an announcement of there was a big announcement that a big holding company in the marketing services space, Omnicom, that they were basically pushing their workers back to the offices, and I was just shocked by that. It was just kind of they backpedaled a bit, and they backpedaled a bit, and they said, "Oh well, we'll try to be flexible too, but the main place will be the office." You're kind of like, you guys are just not. At least I don't feel that they're getting it. They're and so it'll be fascinating to look at what has happened, what happens over the next 12 months. Whether some of these, I would say these amazing freedoms. I speak from experience. I can't say that my business lost any efficiencies.
No. Same.
And so the justification for office culture or office life it's really hard for someone to have to justify a 2-hour commute or whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
And so
there have been so many startups too that have come out of this. Like there's one called Team Flow. And have you ever played The Sims back in the
Yes.
day?
Yeah.
So you may have seen this already, but it's you're basically a sim, and you can decorate your office any way you want. And if you play video games, like sometimes when you're closer to the enemy, you can hear them better, and it's like they're right there. They use the same kind of audio techniques, so you can walk up to people in this virtual office and talk to them, or you can have a private office where people can't hear you, and they embed all of these different apps, these productivity tools that people are already using. It's like being in the office, and that's so much cheaper too than having the overhead of having an office space and the insurance that goes with that, and the cleaning, and maybe the catering, and the supplies. So I think there's, for a lot of businesses and a lot of industries, there's no reason to go back to the office.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and we'll see how things shape over the next year. Well, listen, Janeesa, it's been amazing talking to you today. We've been speaking to Janeesa Hollingshead. She's the co-founder of JJ Studio, a consultancy that specializes in helping Series A and B startups launch and grow their services. Sounds like if you're trying to grow and scale, it'd be a good call to make to JJ Studios. With that in mind, Janeesa, how does someone get in touch with you?
Yeah, if you just go to meetjjstudio.com, you can fill out our contact us form, and we'll get back to you within a day.
That's amazing. Well, listen, Janeesa, thank you so much for being on UNCAGED. UNCAGED is a program that provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. We've been speaking to Janeesa Hollingshead, and she's been telling us all about how, if you want to launch a company, the issues you should be thinking about. And clearly, I think my big takeaway is this idea of this kind of the holistic self, and really how you can structure a business with keeping that in mind. And so thank you so much, Janeesa.
Thank you.
Cheers.